My passion is designing and creating clothing. The main thing that I do is reworking vintage clothing. Mainly I like to go to thrift stores. I'm there all the time, just picking out the most beautiful things that I find and just imagining in my mind what I can do with it. In high school is when I first started to go to thrift stores with my friends. We just did it for fun, and I would always be better at it than them. I would go through and just find really interesting things, but if they weren't really the right size, I would be able to just pin things and move things around and turn it upside down and throw it over my shoulder, and then I would go to school with something really weird on, and people would be like, "What are you wearing?" After high school, I started taking sewing lessons with a woman in Langley, and she actually showed me how to read patterns and how to use the little sewing machine that I bought. She taught me how to sew lingerie, which I really loved. She taught me how to sew dresses, sew pants, and then from then on I would just sew and sew and sew. After I learned how to sew, I knew that I wanted to do something creatively for my career. So I was looking into schools and I found a degree program, which is Quantlin. It's the only degree program in the West Coast. So I applied for it, and I had to do up a whole portfolio, sew a bunch of garments, and they accepted me. So that was a 4-year program where I learned how to, well, first I learned how to sew, and then we learned how to create patterns from scratch, which is very, very mathematical and very puzzle based. So we learned how to do that, and then through the schooling, they taught us how to make technical outerwear, to lingerie, to bathing suits. So anything we wanted to focus on, we learned how to do. And then with our last year of school, we developed our own collection. The summer after I graduated, I knew I needed to find a job. I was kind of putting it off, and then I sat down at my computer, and first thing I opened up was Craigslist. I was like, okay, let's see what's out there. And then I scrolled for maybe 5 minutes, and I came across this job that said vintage company looking for a design and a production manager, and they listed all of these things, and I was like, wow, that sounds exactly what I was looking for. I didn't know that existed. Part of the job description was running a studio, working with reconstructing clothing, small store on Main Street. So I emailed them, and an hour later they gave me a call and said, "Hey, can you come in for a meeting tomorrow?" And I was like, okay. So as soon as I went in for my interview, they really seemed like they needed someone right away. So I told them I was interested, and they said, "Okay, tomorrow." This is a mood board. This is the initial step in the design process. So you want to have your brand name, which I chose the Poetry of Cloth, and you want to have your season, spring, summer 2016. Alongside is the color story. So usually you have about 6 colors, and you just bring in the cohesiveness of each of the picture. You want to have styling details. In the top right corner, I have my grandmother. That's a picture from the 1950s when she was a model. So part of the inspiration is vintage, so I brought that through with many of the images here. Part of the process is cutting out the material for part of the design. This design is pretty close to done, but I'm tailoring it to be a more fitted pant. So I'm using the inner seam of my pattern to get the line perfectly on. So just going along, making sure I'm marking my notches and going up and along. So once that seam is cut, I can use that design line to cut up where I'm going to sew it together. Even this little bit of fabric that I'm taking off will help a lot with the fit of this pant. So this is my computerized industrial sewing machine. This is what I do all of my garments on. I use this all the time. The last step of the process is getting everything on a dress form, checking it, checking all your style details, making sure that it looks good on the body. And then from here, I'll photograph it and I can edit the photos, and then that goes eventually on my website where things can be sold. I want to be able to just make my own line of clothing and have a shop. My main goal for 5 or so years down the road is to be able to have a place where I can hold classes, and it can just be sort of like an inspiration retreat for other like-minded people to come and work, collaborate, take classes. I'll have a shop. I would like to sell things online. The first thing I would recommend if you want to get into the industry is to get a good education. You want to know each one of your skill sets and know what you're strongest in, and also where you're lacking so that you can get help with that. You want to be good at math so you can do pattern making. You want to just be really excited to make clothes.